Everybody asks me how old I am. I always say I'm 110, but I'm not 110. I'm 85 years old. It's kind of interesting to me that I'm still working. I think I should be playing mahjong or bridge with the ladies, but I don't. I write and I write and I write. And I wrote a book called Reparations maybe about 15 years ago. It was difficult to sell because it was a post-Holocaust book, and the timing was wrong. And then I wrote a book called A Woman's Primer before my husband died and finished it after he died. And that's a book about women and their attributes. I also wrote a book about my daughter called Bravo Carrie, but I never meant it to be published. But my son sent it off to the publisher. And so now 3 books of mine are going to be published simultaneously, digitally and in print. I don't get it. I don't always understand it. There are new words, new vocabulary flowing into a Mobi file. I don't know what that is, but I gather it's that. Making covers for the book, both for print and for digital. So the digital thing is amazing to me. It will be printed worldwide. At the same time, you can buy a book in print. I don't know where that's from, but whatever it is, I don't want to get into it. I just write and write and write. I write journals, I write short stories, I write screenplays, I write novels, I write essays, I do it all. Some of it's great, some of it's mediocre, and some of it's awful. I just throw that stuff away. But I love to write. But Reparations is essentially a book of healing. It's a book that begins in Vienna in 1954. It happened 8 years after World War, or 9 years after World War II. It's a story of a young couple, an American couple, Jewish couple that goes to Europe to find, I guess, the golden land or whatever. Molly Rose is the central character of that book. And her husband, Jacob, is a journalist. And that's how the journey begins. And they go all across Europe until he finds a job as a stringer for International News Service in Vienna. And it was in that book that I really began to understand the importance of getting it down on paper. There were lives there that were so seriously damaged by World War II, and I knew these people, that I thought that every story was sacred. Every story had to be told because so many of them lost everything and everyone in their families. Men, women, and the ones who really survived in the forests and in the sewers and with false papers were young enough. They were 14, 15. So when the war ended, they were in their 20s. And they found their way by smuggling. They found how to make a living. This part of it is true. The novel is fictitious, but some of the stuff is really true. I remember one person telling me how he made a living. After the war, after he came out of the forest with his wife, he would get a cigarette from a soldier, an American soldier. And that cigarette he would sell to a Russian or to a German for more money. Then he'd get 2 cigarettes and sell them until he finally had enough money to buy gold bullion. And in the story, in the novel itself, Molly and her husband Jacob become smugglers, couriers for these Jews who would transport goods from one country to another without paying duty. But these goods were all paid for. They were never stolen. But the stories they told, the women suffered so. There were 4 women that I knew very well. This is not fiction. This is true. Clara Goodman, Nellie Abramovitz, Esther, and Irene. I'm not giving you the last names. Nellie was mauled by Mengele. Her reproductive organs were just torn apart. She finally did have children. She also had a blind son. Then there was Irene. Irene was a philosophy professor in New York. How she came to wind up back in Poland, I have no idea. But she married a man who was a survivor, who had lost his wife and 2 young children to the flames of the crematoriums in Auschwitz. There was Esther, a pianist who could never have children, just not. I won't talk about all of them, but you get a picture of what it was like for me, a 24-year-old living in Vienna, meeting all these people brand new. I had no idea who they were. And they did eventually become my family, and they became the germ, the seed for the book Reparations. Some of it's true, most of it is fictitious. The characters are all fictitious. But do give it a read because their stories are really sacred. When I speak publicly, people always ask me how I became a writer. I became a writer because that's what I do? No, that's not the answer. For me, the answer is quite different. I became a writer because my parents were deaf. I had no language, oral language as a child. And they relied on me, who didn't know how to speak orally until I was sent to kindergarten. And they taught me how to love words, how to love language. And so I became a writer in silence. They taught me how to become a writer. They wanted to know the story of everything and everyone. My father would say, "Tell me a story." That's the words in sign language. And he would make me sit there till I told him a story. I'd make it up, or I'd tell him a true story. I don't remember. I was a child. But that's really how I became a writer. And when I begin to think about the books, the two of the three books that are being published now, I think of the Woman's Primer. And that came about in a very strange way because I write in journals. I keep journals. And I would write and record those people who I met by chance, who I met by introduction. I would talk about their eyes, their feet, their comments. And then I began to understand in the book, A Woman's Primer, that women have to recognize their attributes, their worth. I don't like things like words like self-esteem and all that psychobabble that came out of the 80s and 90s. I like to think of women as women and people, and men too, that have honor, that understand daring, that understand the journey, that understand what it means to be part of your life and know that there are ups and downs. I had a friend, still have a friend. His name is Momchilo Bojovic. He was from then Yugoslavia. And I would say to him, "What are you going to do today, Mama?" He'd say, "I'm going to enjoy the life." His English was fractured, but his meaning was very, very clear. So that's probably why I write. When I was in Sweden with them after my father died, I learned so much about life on the other side of the ocean. I learned about how other people speak. And within 2 weeks, I was able to speak very little bit of Swedish, but it's fun. It's fun to speak other languages. You think in different words, you think in different phrases. But I think it's important to have these books out. And now that I'm older, I can't wait. I'm writing another book. I'm writing a book about writing. And that to me is very exciting. I have a title for it, a working title. I'll tell it to you, but doesn't mean it will come out that way or that it will be published. The title is A Writer's Path, a memoir of sorts. I intend it to be humorous, delightful, and a bit of teaching. I want to tell you about me. I've been writing all my life, but I've also had life intervene in many, many ways. I've had children, I've traveled, I've taught everything from 7th grade to the college level. And in those years, there was anxiety and fear, joy and wonder. And now at this stage of my life, I find that I'm rather content, not anxious as I was as a young woman. And life goes on every day. When it ends, it ends. But right now I'm writing another book, and that's the way it goes. It's something that never goes. The writing will continue. It's what I do. It's who I am. It isn't about words on paper. It's about capturing life. There's a proverb in China that says, life begins at 70. I say no. Life begins at 90. And there you are. And I'm going to write and write and write. for the rest of my life.